How's it going, everybody? Welcome to CS2304. We've got week number 6 here. It's crazy how we're already up to this point, but hope you're doing well, and glad to have you back for another week. I know last week's work was a little bit more intense, and quite a bit there. If you got stumped by it, or you feel overwhelmed by it, or like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I want to continue with this class, or just relax and don't worry about it. We'll make it through, and I'm going to talk about that assignment in particular, but we'll get a lot more practice with it. It was good feedback for me. Again, remember, this is my first time teaching this course, and it's hard to gauge a little bit what's too much and what's too little, and so just hang in there. All right. So for this week, just to recap, we're going to have another hands-on assignment, another poll for this week, and this meme is brought to you by a tweet from a friend of mine, Marcos Nils. He's I guess his current title right now is like a senior reliability engineer with a pretty big gaming company down in Brazil right now. But we shall use YAML, they said. It's human readable, they said. And some of YAML's pretty readable, but you may have seen that when you export some of the, just get a pod and YAML format, and it may be a little hard to see on the slide here. Let me get the laser pointer. There's parts of this that are just hard to read and just lots of bunch of random stuff in it. So anyways, I found it pretty hilarious. So anyways, polls for last week, for a live session, what dates or times are going to work best for you? So it looks like Monday night is actually a pretty good candidate. And then beyond that, Wednesday night, I haven't had a chance to go through and find out, okay, how many of those people might be the same Monday for Wednesday or whatnot. So I still need to go through and do a little bit of post-processing of that. And I'll let everybody know when we're going to do a live session. It probably won't be next week, but maybe the following week. We'll just see. So anyway, stay tuned. Don't worry too much about it yet. Would you be interested in behind the scenes of how I make my videos and everything? Talk about the equipment, software, and all that kind of stuff. Since about 3/4 of you said you would be interested, maybe I'll go ahead and do one and post it. Again, it'll just be an extra type thing. It won't be part of any grade or anything of that sort. But my setup has evolved over time, and in fact, I'm actually using 2 different computers. One to do the Kubernetes and slides and all that kind of stuff, and then the other one is actually my actual recording machine. So I can talk about how I got all that set up, and that's used a lot in like the professional streaming and gaming type setups. So, anyways, yeah, I'll have to do that sometime. All right, and then the third one. Now that we're a few weeks into the semester, how are you? So quite a few of you are doing pretty well overall. Over half of you, but half of you are having a hard time, and I'm sorry to hear that. If there's anything I can personally do to help you out if you're going through a difficult time, don't hesitate to reach out. And it's a reminder for all of us too, especially those of you that are students, which is all of you. But reach out to your friends or reach out to others and just check in and see how they're doing. I know the fall time is usually a pretty good time, but especially as we get into winter, a lot of people get seasonal depression and other kinds of stuff too. And check in with each other and reach out to somebody you haven't talked to in a while. Okay. So that's just a personal challenge, nothing to do with class, but reach out. Okay. All right. So at this point, what I want to do is I want to go actually through last week's hands-on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the window here, and I'm going to go through kind of step by step, and I'm going to bring up another terminal here and kind of go through it, and we'll solve it together, and maybe you'll see if you got it right. Maybe you'll see another way to think about it, or if you didn't get it, here's the answer. Okay. All right. So this first one, using environment variables, we're going to have some fun with environment variables. So the first thing I need to do is apply this manifest, and so I'm going to go apply it. I won't use the alias just for you guys. Apply this file, and that'll take a moment to fetch and create everything. Now, so the next step that it tells us is to define a pod named vote that uses the Docker samples, this image, and a label that matches what the vote service is looking for. Okay, so if you got stumped by this, remember that that services are a network abstraction, and and are going to expose pods on the network. But the way that they expose the pods is by doing label selection. Okay. So if I look at the describe the service, the vote service, it'll tell me that its selector is using a label that looks like this, that has a value of a vote. Okay, so what that means is when I define my pod, I need to give my pod a label with this name and a value of that name. Okay, so we'll do that in just a minute. And then you should be able to see the endpoints on the vote service once you have it working correctly. So I'm going to copy this image name, and let's create I'm going to create another manifest. API version v1. And I've done this enough that I don't have to reference the docs all that much. All right, so it says I need to name my pod vote, and the labels, oops. Let's go split screen here. Describe service vote, just so I make sure that I get it right. So app.kubernetes.io/name of vote. Okay. And now I don't need this bottom one anymore. Okay. Spec, containers. In this case, it didn't. I didn't have a specific name that you needed to give the container, so you can just name anything. In this case, I'll just name it vote. Image is going to be that image, and that's it. Okay. So let's go ahead and apply that. And once I do that, I should be able to get the endpoints for the vote service. Oops. And I see that I have an endpoint there now. Okay, so what this means is, if I were to actually, let's go ahead and do a port forward. Port forward, and I'm going to just pick 8090 to 8080 of the vote pod. Now, if I open up localhost 8090, I should see the vote cats and dogs there. Okay. All right, so the next step was in the vote pod, let's define two environment variables, okay? And it says we're going to define option A as Windows and option B as Mac. Okay, if you need help figuring out, okay, there's some pointers. So let me modify this. We're going to specify environment, name option A, value of Windows, name option B, value of Mac. Now, if I try to apply this, it's going to blow up on me. Okay. And actually, in this week's material, we're going to talk about other ways to get it so that we can deploy our applications a little bit more seamless rather than having to destroy it and create a new one. So until then, I'm going to go ahead and delete the pod and then recreate it. And this may take a while. It may take a few seconds. It may take more than a few seconds. It just depends. And honestly, I don't know 100% of the reason why sometimes it goes really quick and sometimes it doesn't. But anyways, now if I try to do my port forward again, oops, I have to wait for it to actually start up. Now if I go, actually I've got the tab there. If I refresh, now I see Windows versus Mac. Cool. All right, so let's continue on. Now define a pod named result. So let's make a result pod. Now, of course, I'm doing this all in the command line. You're welcome to use whatever tooling that you want. Okay, pod. It says the name needs to be result. Okay. And so I need to do the same thing with the result service. So kubectl describe service result. And I see basically the same thing, just a different value. So app Kubernetes IO name result. And then it tells me that spec containers name, I'm just going to name a result. It doesn't matter. Image is going to be copy and paste that. Okay. And I don't have to specify the environment variables here. But I could. So let's actually do it anyways. Okay. I think this image lets me do it. Value Mac. Okay. Now I run that. And so let's run my port forward 8090 to vote. And then down here, kubectl port forward result, I'll go 8091, 80. And so now if I refresh there, get 8091, I should get my results. Okay. And so I can say Windows. And if I go over here, it may take a second. There it goes. Now if I go Mac, I see it. The results. Hooray. Okay. So now let's kill those port forwards. And it says, let's run the verifier. Wait for it to start up. Start up faster. Okay. All right. And so localhost 9119. Run the tests. And it seems to be taking a while. All right, let's refresh. One thing I can do is I can look at the logs. Oops, I shouldn't have refreshed. So you can actually, if you watch the logs, you can see the test run. Okay. And so there's the flag, let the battle continue between Mac and Windows. Cool. All right, so that works. I can stop the logs, I can stop the port forwarding, and let's see, and then I can tear everything down. So kubectl, delete the verifier pod, and then kubectl, delete all the files in this directory, and then let's change that to a delete as well. Just nuke everything. All right. So that's the first problem there. Okay. And I think for the most part, that one wasn't too bad. The second one I know caused some issues. So let's go through this one. Okay. So ConfigMaps can be used to inject files into the container file system. Now, so again, the way to think about ConfigMaps is, and especially when you use volumes, when you create a volume, think of that you've got a USB drive, and I'm just putting files onto that drive, and it could be directories or files or whatever. But I have this USB drive. Now, normally when you plug a USB drive, the host OS is going to pick a spot to mount that. But theoretically, you could, through the command line, unmount it and then mount it somewhere else, and you can put it anywhere on your file system. So when we are building this volume, again, think of it as I'm building a USB drive that has files on it. And then when I specify the mount path, I'm saying where in the file system am I going to plug in this USB drive, and now those files are made available. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just skip the Nginx stuff because I think that for the most part, that's just copy and paste. And we're going to talk about this challenge here. Okay, so for your challenge in this portion, you need to solve this problem. Okay, so this container image takes a file found at data input.txt and prints out a value to the console that's available through the logs. Okay, so again, this is an app that's just going to start up, print something, and then tear down. Okay, when that file contains Kubernetes is amazing, what value do you get? You will need to create a config map to provide the value, launch the pod, and view the log. So the idea here is that just as in Nginx, we provided a index.html to serve the website. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to create a file named input.txt that contains the Kubernetes is amazing contents, and then from there, mount it into the as a volume into the pod and let it run. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's call this the input challenge. Doesn't really matter what I call it. Okay, so API versions v1, and so what I'm going to do first is create my config map. And it doesn't matter what I name it. I'm just going to call it input data. Okay, and then the data here, input.txt, and there's a couple different ways that I can specify the value. So I can put Kubernetes is amazing like this. Okay, and that's completely valid. But a lot of times for files, I use the kind of like the pipe multi-line syntax here, okay? Because a lot of times files are going to be multiple lines. So I personally like to start it this way, so that way if I need to add additional lines, I don't have to go and reformat the rest of my my config there. So I'm going to specify it this way. So Kubernetes is amazing. Now at this point, I need to specify my pod. API version, v1, kind is a pod, metadata, it doesn't matter what I call it, but I'm just going to call it the input challenge. And let's give it a spec. Containers, and I'm going to have one container. I'm just going to call the first one input, and the image, I'm going to copy and paste that so I don't mess it up. Now, first I'm going to create the volume, and then we'll come back and create the volume mount. Okay, so again, think of the volumes as a USB drive that I'm going to create. And so I'm going to create a volume, okay, and the name, I'm just going to call it input data. Okay, again, it's just a name. You can give it any name that you want, okay? And the data for that, depending on what type of volume you're going to use, is going to vary the keys and the configuration that you specify here. So since I'm using a config map, I'm going to specify config map. And the name of the config map needs to match the one that I specified up here, which is input data. Okay. So at this point, I've specified a volume with these these 4 lines of config, and I have this USB drive. Okay, it's just kind of floating out there. And what I need to do now is I need to update my container to now actually mount that. Okay. So I'm going to specify, so in this case, the name is the name of the volume that I want to mount, which is going to be input data. And now I need to tell the container runtime engine where should this mount point end up, okay? Or where should this volume be mounted? And the way that I do that is specifying mount path. Now there was a lot of confusion of what this value should be, okay? So remember that the volume here, when it's populated by the config map, is going to create a USB drive that has a file name input.txt with the value of Kubernetes is amazing. Okay. And when it creates that, again, it's going to plug it in wherever I plug it in. Since I want the input.txt file to be found at data/input.txt, okay, according to the challenge, that means that I want the mount path to be just /data. Okay. So if the mount path is /data, what that means is the USB drive will be plugged in at /data, and since it has a file name input.txt, at /data/input.txt will be a file that contains the contents Kubernetes is amazing. Okay, and I hope that makes sense. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. So let's apply the challenge. And what you'll see is that it will create a pod. And it should say completed. Now I saw that some of you were getting the crash loop back off, and that's okay. Okay, because this is a container that just runs a process and then exits immediately. It shouldn't have been a failure exit code, so for that I apologize. But if I look at the logs now, I should get a value. Okay, and that's one of the accepted values for the quiz there. And so that's the challenge there. Again, I use a config map to create a volume that has a file in it, and then mount that into the container at the location that the process was looking for it. And there we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and tear that down. And now let's look at the last challenge, the last problem here. And I think most people, if they got to this one, were able to follow along with this, but we'll go through it together real quick. Okay, so let's define a secret, and I'm going to call it lamp.ymo. So in case you're not familiar, LAMP stands for Linux Apache MySQL PHP, which is a pretty common application stack. Now, it says, before applying the secret, replace the value of username with grocery app and the password of the value 123 password exclamation, no quotes. Remember that all the values in the secret need to be base 64 encoded. So I'm going to go to this tool here. I'm going to just paste in grocery app, hit encode, and it's going to give me a value here. And so I'm going to plug in username as that value. And now the password, I go back here and get 123 password exclamation. Now, if you know how to do base64 at the command line, or you've got a plugin for like Visual Studio Code, by all means use it. I just use this link just because it's something that I can plug into the write-up, and it's pretty easy to use. Okay, so now let's go ahead and apply this, and then I should be able to see the secret DB credentials. Cool. All right, so I'm going to define a pod named DB that uses, okay, so let's continue. So I'm going to define another pod named DB, and it says I need to use the image Mixer87 lamp demo MySQL, and it says that I need a label of key component with a value of DB. Okay. It says on the container, create a volume mount. So we will create a volume mount that will mount a volume named credentials to /credentials. And so that's the mount path. Okay. It'll look similar for the volume itself. We're going to populate it using a secret. Okay. So like before, we're going to create another volume, another USB drive. But in this case, instead of populating that with a config map, we're going to populate it with a secret. And so we just have to use different configuration on the the volume to specify how it's going to be populated. Okay. Now, it says before launching the database, we need to specify a few environment variables. Okay, so I'm going to go up here and I'll specify a few environment variables. It says I need to specify MySQL database and give it a value of app_db. I need to specify MySQL user file, and this has a value of /credentials /username. And so if we kind of look at this, what this is saying is, hey, MySQL, when you start up, the username, the username to populate the database with will be found at this file. And since we're mounting that as a volume, what that means is it's going to use the value of the username secret, which is this base64 decoded. Okay, so that's what's going on here. Name, MySQL password file, and it's going to be the same thing, credentials /password. Okay, now it says launch the pod. Oops, unknown field. Oops, that should have been plural. There we go. Seeing this pod will be accessed by the front end. So create a service. All right, so now let's create a service. Now there's a lot of stuff to create, huh? Okay, so I'm going to create a service. I'm going to put a lot of spaces at the bottom here just to let it scroll up. Metadata, and it says that the name needs to be DB, and select the DB pod using the component label. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to give it spec, and the selector for this is going to use the component DB label. Okay, and then finally it says that the database uses port 3306, so I want to do 3306. And I should see the service get created here. And if I get the endpoints for the DB service now, there we go. Hooray, it worked. Okay, so now it's time to define the front end pod. All right, and API version v1, kind is a pod. It says it needs to use the name front end. And it defines a container that uses the, okay, so let's create a container. It doesn't specify the name that we need to use, so I can make up any name. Mixer87 lamp demo app. And so it's going to create a volume named credentials that's populated using the secret name DB credentials. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that real quick. So create a volume named credentials, since it specified the name that we need to use. The secret is going to be the same secret. And then it specifies that the volume mount I need to use is going to put that secret at the mount path of /credentials as well. So what this is doing is it's allowing me to define the secrets, the credentials for my database, but then I can define it once in the secret and then share it between the two different pods. So I never have to worry about, oops, one got configured one way, one got configured a different way, because they're sharing the same data. And then finally it says I need to specify a DB username file and give it the value of credentials/username. And finally, DB password file and a value of credentials/password. Okay. Whew, a lot there. Now if I apply this, oops. Did I spell that wrong? DB credentials. Oops. The volume, I used the wrong name in the mount. That's right. Okay, so now the pod starts up, and if I get the pods, I should see it's creating. Now it's running, and so let's go ahead and do a port forward of the front end, and it doesn't matter what I need or what port I use. So let's use 8097. Just pick a random number here. And if I go to localhost 8097 now, we see that, hey, the grocery app is here. And if I go add some milk or some eggs to my groceries, okay, it's persisting the data. It's there. Cool. All right, so it looks like the app is working. So now I can run the verifier. And wait for it to start. There we go. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did last time of actually watch the logs. And localhost 9119, oops, 9119. Run tests. And this will kick off the maybe. Hello. There it goes. I think it takes longer the very first time that you do it, just because it's got to load all the like, test framework and everything. Now, if I run this again, it's probably going to be should be a little bit faster. But I mean, we saw that it passed, and it gave me my flag there. So yeah, the first time it took 19 seconds. The second time 8.5 or almost 9 seconds. So, so there's my answer for the second one there. So, and once you're done, tear everything down and kind of go from there. So again, I know there was a lot to go through there, and that's kind of on purpose. I want you to get in the habit of creating pods, creating services, and remembering how they all connect to each other, how to define environment variables and volumes. And we're going to continue doing this throughout the rest of the semester. Okay, so kind of get practice with it, and that's kind of the whole point. Again, remember, I'm trying to get you ready to do the Certified Kubernetes Application Developer exam, and with that, you're only going to have a fixed amount of time to solve quite a few problems. And the more familiar you are, and the more you remember how the various pieces connect to each other, the easier it'll be for you. So if it's a struggle, that's okay. Don't stress out about it. Keep going. And honestly, even if you have a week or two of, oops, you just didn't make it and things slid or whatever, don't worry about it. I'm not trying to be a hard grader by any means. So just hang in there. As always, if you've got questions, feel free to reach out, and we'll kind of go from there. So enjoy the rest of the lectures for this week, and hope you have a great week. Okay, bye.